Hello and welcome back to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Live 2020. I'm Richard Logan, event and content producer here at Automotive Logistics, and it's my pleasure to host you for the next half an hour, along with a couple of experts, as we discuss the rise of supply chain 4.0. Technology is driving supply chain transformation, and one of the most exciting technologies out there is the Internet of Things. But you don't need me to talk about that, so that's why I want to introduce my panelists here today, Ahmed Abdelhalim and Benjamin Mazet, both experts from ALPS Alpine and Sigfox, here to talk you through the Internet of Things and how that's going to revolutionize supply chain, and specifically a case study looking at packaging and how that's going to change. So I'd like to hand over to my guests for welcome and introduction, and take your presentation away.
Thank you very much, Richard. So, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about how to optimize the logistics loop by utilizing an IT solution. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so before we talk about a dynamic solution utilizing IoTs, let's first of all, the operation and the management of a pool of packaging within the automotive supply chain is by far not limited to the sole acquisition and provision of the containers in the supply chain. There are various key challenges which come along with the packaging pool, like handling cost, the loss rate in the containers or in the assets, and the lack of availability and traceability. So roughly speaking, the logistics cost of handling a container is equal to 10 times the cost of the container itself. So in other words, if a company bought a box for 800 euros, they can expect to spend up to 8,000 euros in handling costs over its lifetime. Another key challenge, of course, is the loss of the containers, where the containers disappear. And it's a significant number that can actually add up to 10 to 15% of the pool per year that needs compensation on a yearly basis. So, and this happens due to mistakes in the supply chain, containers getting misused, or stakeholders in the supply chain holding back the containers. Maybe a term like banking, some people might be familiar with in this field. And all of that results in loss and shortage, and eventually continuous cost for replenishment of the containers. There are also other concerns, like having a survey that was run over 50 companies in the sector, that packaging availability and traceability is also concerned for 43% in this survey. So why this is actually happening? Next slide, please. So the problem is there are two main factors, which is the combination of a growing complexity of the logistics field or packaging, and at the same time, the lack of transparency across the whole chain. In other words, a single shipment within the supply chain can involve up to 30 stakeholders and 200 different interactions. So for monitoring each shipment, each stakeholder has or may not have their own system or their own data source that's very fragmented and depends on so many different architectures and systems, like RFIDs, like barcodes and NFCs. So this lack of collaboration and also maybe some technical barriers is one of the main issues that actually facing the supply chain logistics in that field. The information, actually having the information and the data available, or actually the fragmentation of the data in that sense, This makes the end-to-end visibility of the shipment and the assets involved in extremely complicated to achieve. So having an IT-based solution will avoid and overcome the challenge we have just listed. And this simply happens because the IT solution leads to single source of data and enables full transparency across the whole supply chain. And we'd like to call this, or actually we call this kind of like a digital control tower. This digital control tower is independent of the stakeholders, is independent of the destination, the transport mode, and the asset type. So it is a complete end-to-end solution in that perspective. Next slide, please. So just to dig a little bit deeper into the details of the challenges and the issues that we see in the automotive packaging. So where are the issues explicitly happening in the packaging loop? Here is an example for a typical journey for empty assets from the OEM to the supplier, and then the full assets returned from the supplier back to the OEM. The first common issue that happens that when the order or the PO comes out from the OEM, the supplier doesn't have enough empty containers. And this leads to the second issue, which is simply the supplier in that case is kind of like enforced, or what they do usually that they need to send disposable packages to the OEM and eventually relate that to an extra cost. And of course, the common error or issue, which is during transit, that the assets could be lost temporarily or by being delayed for a few days in an undefined zones or areas, or being permanently lost, or of course the third problem of being lost, that they are being misused, going also offsite. All of these issues combined result in the non-arrival of the parts in the right time to the production or to the OEM, which in extreme cases or in worst cases, this would stop the production line eventually. Next, please. So a logistic IT solution works on different pillars in order to maximize the benefits and overcome the problems that we have just discussed. These pillars have mainly one focus, and this focus is how to reduce the cost across the whole supply chain. Going through these 4 pillars, the first one is reducing the package leaks and bottlenecks. As mentioned, one of the main industry problem is the loss rate. So by decreasing the this 10 or 15% loss rate, this means that we decrease the compensation, yearly compensation needed, and hence minimize the cost. The second point is the fully automated and daily inventory. In that context, inventory management is one of the key aspects in the process optimization. So offering reports on the status of the assets, whether it's full, it's empty, it's in maintenance, it's on-site, it's off-site, it's in transit, would result in reducing a lot of the manual handling, which is another huge contributor, as mentioned, to the cost itself. So also minimize the, cut the cost and reduce the cost. The third pillar in that context is accurate packaging cycle times. So how long does it take for the asset to make one complete loop? A full visibility on the asset cycles and its timing will result in an optimized fleet size. So understanding the cycle times lead to reducing the fleet size, because what could happen also, or actually not what could happen, what usually happens, that a lot of immobilized capitals, because the fleet size is not fully utilized or fully optimized. And of course, the packaging shortage, which is the case as explained of using disposable containers instead of the empty containers, because it is not available at the supplier in that sense. So by anticipating such shortage through the visibility offered from the solution, we could simply eliminate or remove this extra cost completely. And for the more details of the solution itself, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Benjamin for the next part.
Thank you, Ahmed. So next slide, please. Okay, so the third challenge on this returnable industrial packaging and more generally on the supply chain is to provide visibility on the different assets in their rotation between stakeholders. This is where the IoT enter into the game by providing a reliable means to track the usage and the location of those packaging. The starting point of the solution is a tracker designed and manufactured by ALPS Alpine, easily pluggable on the packaging, on the existing one, that is robust and industrial grade device with a long battery life between 3 to 5 years, minimizing interruption or maintenance operation. This tracker is able to detect events based mainly on motion and to provide contextual information such as Wi-Fi access point around it. This tracker will be able to communicate this information, whatever its location, thanks to the 0G network provided by Sigfox. This network is reliable, available in 72 countries, ensuring indoor and outdoor coverage. This raw data collected by the network will be transformed in smart information directly usable for the customer, such as the location information. Then, those data and information are processed to enable an accurate asset management with, first, an automated inventory by knowing at any moment where the packaging are, and secondly, a traceability on the different movements in order to have better visibility on the real usage. This solution allows a reduction of the loss, an optimization of the usage thanks to the tracking and by taking actions between the different stakeholders, and as well a close monitoring of the overall process to prevent the disruption. This solution is a real alternative to the ones based on proprietary readers, such as barcode or RFID, that are expensive to deploy and to maintain, especially in sites belonging to different stakeholders and owners. It presents the interest to support the tracking of closed and open loop logistic chain as it requires no particular installation on site. Last but not least, this is a source of truth that allows in one platform to aggregate the data for actionable information, alerts and notification, helping decision in reactive or proactive actions. In addition, the solution gives visibility on the liability of the processes and the responsibilities in case of issue. It really transforms the connected asset in connected processes, reducing cost, CapEx and OpEx on resources. Next slide. It is important to notice that the real value of the IoT solution will be provided over times with different phases. The first, the IoT solution will, with direct visibility on assets, enable some corrective actions, directly impacting the costing structure of the process, mainly focused at the beginning on the loss problematic. In a second step, by gaining in visibility combined with analytics, the customer will be able to have a deeper view on the process efficiency and put in place actions with his supplier to improve it. Ultimately, he will be able to predict issues by having in a real-time all metrics to monitor his logistic flow. This joint solution provided by ALPS and Sigfox help to structure and to accelerate this learning path for the customer. He will gain in time to put the corrective and improving action in his RIP management. Next, please. Let's review now concretely the impact of the solution for the customer. The first challenge that the solution aims at solving is to reduce the loss of rate of the packaging. Those leaks are mainly due to a lack of accurate visibility on the location of the RIP between the different automaker and supplier sites. That they could be remained for a while in a storage area. They can be stolen. They can be reused for other customer of the supplier. In worst case, automaker has to repurchase some of them to prevent any leaks. Studies and feedback for several customers evaluate this annual loss rate to 10%, meaning that for a volume of 600K units rotating for production and for a packaging at €400 price, it represents a loss of 24 million euro per year. Thanks to the solution, the customer will be able to know the location of those RIP in their premises or at the supplier site. With this visibility, some recovery action can be taken and some improvements could be put in place in the processes between stakeholders. Of course, it will be difficult to prevent 100% of the loss, but simply by reducing by 50%, this is 12 million euros that the customer gain per year. The second point is on the investment. The product line of a car is set up for 7 years. In this deployment process, there is a learning phase to ramp up and to optimize the process with massive investment to sustain the production. For the industrial packaging manager, this is critical to prevent any leak of the packaging and its related content that could stop the production. He has to define its order to supplier to sustain the production by limiting as well as much as possible inventory that are costly. He has to know how long it will take for a RIP to make its rotation between the suppliers, the local inventory, and the production. Based on this information, he will be able to evaluate the number of packaging that will be required to sustain the production. But today, he has no accurate figures to define this value and its trend. So he uses experience, he takes some large buffer to limit the risk. Thanks to the solution, he is able now to have reporting on the past execution and define more precisely the duration of the life cycle with the different phase between transport, production, and waiting time. He is also able to define the real buffer that he has to use. In that case, he will be able to reduce, for example, the cycle time from 15 days to 13 days, and his buffer from 50% to 5%, reducing by 20% the overall investment for a production run. The last but not least, in this flow between the supplier and the automaker, leaks happens, and some disposable RIP could be used by the supplier to prevent any delays in their deliveries. Those disposable RIP are charged to the automaker. Most of the time, there is no visibility on the leak and why disposable had been used. There is no clear definition on the responsibility, and so at the end, the automaker has to pay. This could be linked to an inefficiency in terms of management of the RIP. It could be linked to a delay in the logistic chain. With a usage rate of disposable RIP to 4%, we are talking about more than 1 million spent on 600K unit constantly in rotation. With the automatic reporting on inventories and the flow, the industrial packaging manager has an overall status day by day. He will be able to challenge the real usage of the disposable RIP, challenge bills presented by suppliers, and detect potential delay in the logistic flow. He can gain 30% of saving on his actual bill. Next slide, please. So the main benefits of this ALPS Alpine and Sigfox automotive packaging tracking solution are a significant reduction of the loss rate with the associated cost on the asset replacement, but as well on the loss of goods for the production. Thanks to the traceability and the flow monitoring, an optimization on the usage of those different packaging with reduction of the pool required, it generates a significant reduction of the investment and immobilized capital in stock on asset side and on good side. Traceability and automatic reporting reduce also significantly manual handling and increase accuracy of information. Human force will be concentrating on key issue at the production instead of spend hours on checking inventories. The monitoring and the reporting anticipate shortage in terms of stocks, limiting the usage of disposable devices and being able to provide evidence in case of claims. Finally, it prevents disruption by avoiding or anticipating shortage, production breakdown or slowdown that are critical for the automakers. To conclude, the integration of the IoT provide real perspective of improvements for the returnable industrial packaging management with a smooth and seamless solution for the customer. Thanks.
Great, fantastic. I think that's a really insightful and fascinating look at something which possibly many of us thought was kind of far off in the future, but great to see it being implemented now and how that's working. During the presentation, we had a couple of questions coming from the audience, so keen to go straight into them. And while we have you on the panel, so the first one, tracker lifetime is 3 to 5 years. can you achieve longer times?
Of course, actually, the whole idea of the tracker, or one of the core competences or the core concepts that we have in such IT solutions in general, or the challenges also, is to match the lifetime of the asset itself. And usually, the asset lifetimes in this field, they live for 5 or 7 or maybe 8 years, and this is what could be achieved from a battery lifetime for the containers, or for the asset. Because simply the whole idea here is just pivot and go. So basically just one-time installment, and then you forget about this asset in the field. So based on of course, on the configuration and the setting that you have, but we can achieve with this actually tracker up to 10 years of lifetime.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. And then diving into the next question from our audience, comment, very interesting. Can you share who is already using this solution? Are you in a position to do that?
Not all of them, of course, but we can actually share at least a couple what's already public in this field. So first, we have, of course, in the automotive industry, we have PSA is actually deploying IBM with IBM. It's a partnership with IBM France, and PSA is using this solution at the moment. And in the non-automotive field is also tracking trolleys and assets, DHL Deutsche Post, which is actually using already deployed around 400,000, if I remember the number correctly, of these assets are already available in the field or deployed in the field. And there are some of other customers, of course, but I'm not in place at the moment to disclose the customer names at this point. Some of them are also automotive.
Absolutely. Well, great to see that you're already supporting the automotive industry. And interesting as well that it can be multi-sector. So hopefully many more of our audience will be engaged in looking to work with you on that as well. Another question that came in from the audience: what would be the location accuracy based on the ALPS Alpine tracker?
So the location accuracy here. Go ahead.
No, okay. Now, so the location accuracy that we can reach, so essentially based on the Wi-Fi access point, could be between let's say 50 meters to 250 meters. So it's in line with I would say the range that we could have on the Wi-Fi access point. The good point is we have this capacity to have an high accuracy, especially in the different production sites that we could have on the automotive. But what we have as well is a backup solution when, for example, the device is totally out of those sites and for example in the middle of nowhere. And here we have a solution to localize the device purely based on metadata coming from our network. And in that case, we have an accuracy around, I would say, 1 to 2 kilometers in order to be able to detect, especially in case of loss, to detect where is the asset exactly.
Great, thank you. Absolutely, and something that popped up in the presentation, a question talking about the time ratio for the solutions implementation. Benjamin, perhaps you can expand a little bit more on that. How long is required for this?
Okay, so most of the time, this kind of solution is put in place in phases, and so the first phase, let's maybe call it a pilot that we are doing with the customer, because the idea here will be to put in place the device on the different assets in order to look at the first flow and to be able to define what kind of event we should absolutely track to better understand the different location. And so this first phase should normally be, I would say, executed on a range of 1,000 devices to 5,000 devices during 3 to 6 months in order to have, I would say, a good background, a good history in terms of data collected, and so put in place the analytics. After these 3 to 6 months, we can move to production, to real production solution. So where here it's really depend on the customer. We can talk about several tens of thousands of devices that will be put in place to I would say to monitor their flows.
Great, thank you. And I've seen some more questions coming through again from the audience. So a very engaged audience right now, which is great. Great to see. Someone asking about information on price, which I'd suggest you have that conversation on the e-booth, either with Benjamin or Ahmed or the teams that are supporting the e-booth. So I suggest you take that conversation there and connect with the team. Another one that's just come through: technology is changing so rapidly. How do we know when is the optimum time to implement?
Well, I would say the optimum time to implement was yesterday. So it is true, and we see that actually with our daily interactions, and also with our current existing customers, and also the new customers in that perspective. It is because the problem is, and this is one of the main challenges that happening in this field, that the information is not really available. Just to give you an example, we're talking about, we give an example of 10% or 15% loss rate, but I'll be very blunt here. And then when you talk to the main players, it would be difficult for them to admit really that they have 10% or 15% loss. They will say that they have the expansion of the business of 20% on yearly basis. This 20%, half of it already is because of lost containers. So the numbers and the figures itself, it's quite difficult if you don't have this kind of visibility. So that's why I'd say yesterday is the time to implement that, because this is when you really can optimize. It's like having the visibility and the transparency is the first step towards a fully optimized fleet or supply chain management.
And the other point is the fact that here the solution that we are talking about is based on technology that I would say already proof on the field that they are able to work and that they are able to provide reliable services. So here it's more a matter of having an actor that is ready to take this challenge, and so to look at more into the detail of his processes, more than I would say embrace the technology, because the technology is already there and already robust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to the initial point about when is the right time, is it yesterday? We've been having conversations throughout this conference where we're asking our audience and asking our experts, are you proactive or reactive? And I'm in your boat, Ahmed, in terms of this is the time to be proactive. This is the time to make change and transform the business.
It is indeed, because honestly, it's also a matter now of especially after the pandemic. It's a matter of life and death. It's not a matter of having an innovative solution, but rather, in order to survive, this is actually the transformation that's needed in that perspective. So yeah.
Absolutely. And a few other questions have come through just regarding the presentation. How can other than the e-booth, how can people engage with Sigfox ALPS Alpine to get this information? There was a lot of content in that fantastic presentation. Can we share?
Yeah, actually, we have the presentation available actually on our landing page, or our website. We're actually created for this event, where you'll have actually more information about the solution, about or let me put it this way, different assets are simply available there. One of them is the presentation, and there are also some other materials that could give more insights about the overall solution, ALPS Alpine and Sigfox solution. So this is actually can be shared, and you can find also the link for that on our e-booth. So you can get this material simply.
And of course, we will be more than happy to have I would say direct discussion about the solution, see how it can fit with customer expectations, and how we can put that in place for sure. Yes.
Great. Well, that's fantastic, and that's a message for our audience on a wider note as well, to continue using the platform to engage, to network, utilize the e-booths, the expertise and material that's there. We've got experts, we've got specialists, so do engage with them and make the most of these opportunities. We're out of time now, so I want to say thank you very much to our expert panelists, Ahmed and Benjamin. Thank you so much for your time and the information you've shared. And yeah, we've got a small break now before the next session. So again, encourage people to utilize that time on the Brella platform, and we look forward to seeing you back in a few hours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.